You are live on YouTube. All right, we are live everywhere.
Hey.
Hello and welcome to The Compass. Today we are here with special guest Eapen Thampy. We have video, we have audio, and we're going to talk about the psychedelic movement today, broadly and in the state of Missouri. Very excited about this thing. Been pushing for some legislation here in the state of Missouri now for a couple years. Been testifying up at some little committees that they have up there. Basically what happens when you put a bill in is first you put it in and then it goes to a committee based on what type of policy or what type of thing you're trying to get passed. And then from there, that committee that's made up of representatives that have been elected basically brings in the people for it and against it and kind of talks about it, asks a lot of questions, goes through it all, and then makes a decision. Do we like this or not? Is this a positive step for the state of Missouri? And then based on that, if it passes or fails, is whether or not the House of Representatives votes on it that year. Am I getting that right?
Basically, yeah.
Basically, exactly. Okay. And so you have recently went to MAPS.
Yeah, the Denver conference of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
And you have some psychedelic conferences going in St. Louis, Kansas City, and then a roundtable discussion here in Columbia coming soon. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so October 21 in St. Louis, we are doing the first of our two-part Missouri Psychedelic Missouri Freedom Conferences. And we'll have clinical researchers, folks in the legal profession, folks from law enforcement, first responders, political officials, and several veteran groups that are pushing to expand legal access to psychedelic medicine in the United States. And then we go to Kansas City on the next weekend, October 28th. And kind of the same idea, some different speakers in St. Louis and Kansas City.
What is this? Is it conference? What did you say it was? Or is it?
So Psychedelic Missouri Freedom Conference. First part is in St. Louis, October 21. Second part is in Kansas City, October 28.
Yeah. Okay.
All the information's on the website at psychedelicmissouri.com.
Okay.
And then in November, we'll probably do like an advocacy conference, and this will probably be virtual. We'll have identified a lot of folks who have, we've identified a lot of folks over the years and through our events that want to take the next step and be part of the advocacy for these proposals. And we'll do a seminar on, state and federal advocacy. So, kind of excited about that. And, we're probably 8 months, maybe a year away from the Food and Drug Administration approving MDMA, which most people probably know as ecstasy. But this used to be a legal drug in the United States, and until 1985, and then they banned it. They put it into Schedule I, which means it, you can't prescribe it, you can't have access to it. But the FDA is going to approve MDMA next year to treat PTSD, and the clinical trial data is pretty astonishing. Between 70 and 80% of subjects after 2 months after the treatment have gone into complete remission from PTSD.
Really?
Yeah, there's really nothing like it. So
this is a substance that is a derivative or like a byproduct of the production of root beer.
Yeah, sassafras, I think, or mimosa.
Really?
Yeah.
Correct.
Are we getting a weird echo in here?
I think that we can hear it, but I don't think it's going to pick up on the audio because we've got this wall behind us.
Okay.
But the software is usually good at kicking that out.
All right.
It's probably not going to be an
Sorry if y'all hear it.
Yeah. No. It should be good. Because we hear a little bit, but the recording won't. So.
And do we have the link yet?
Oh yeah. Let me get this link going here. Because I know
Sassafras.
So did you know that Coca-Cola was originally just a liquid cocaine product?
I did know
that
that.
they just was getting people high off of. And so how would I find that? Oh, go to this. There, it's that.
On Twitter?
No, on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, your channel. There you go. It's right there. I should be live on that one. So, yeah, and so especially with these things, that company didn't really want to lose their entire company when we decided to have a drug prohibition in the United States. And so what they did was they just created a situation where they were still selling it's like a near beer. Imagine like non-alcoholic beer. That's what Coke is now. Mm-hmm. Coke, the soda, is a sugared up in a version of its previous drug self. And that's the same with root beer. It's actually true that you're not allowed to produce real natural root beer at all and sell it. You cannot actually make from the plant root beer in the United States legally and sell it. You have to do
if you made real root beer,
artificial flavor.
Would it have any of the effects of like MDMA?
I mean, yeah, if you just boil sassafras root and turn it into like a drink and you don't like separate that part
so
out.
Like real authentic root beer would really.
Also black pepper. Black pepper is another thing that has a really strong like regulation on it because of what you can do with
I also wear black pepper.
I'm certain the black pepper. I'm not 100% sure of what you can even do with it, but it's another one of those.
Let's do this. Excuse my ignorance, but I know nothing about any of this. I'm along for the ride today, nothing more. But I assume there's probably a lot of people out here watching that are in the same boat. So when you say I want to just legalize psychedelics, people automatically start thinking of like, club kids tripping or whatever. And why do we want to do that?
Yeah.
Let's get moved past that and talk about the benefits.
Everything in life has a way to do it right and a way to do it wrong. Mm-hmm. Even with food, you can overdo it, underdo it. And so, with freedom comes a responsibility to be able to manage that freedom and to kind of live inside the boundaries of discipline and to live inside moderation. And there are some substances out there that people have a harder and harder time coming in contact with and then being able to manage a relationship with that substance. And so it makes sense. And alcohol is in that group, right? Marijuana is in that group. Coffee is even in that group. Sugar is absolutely
for sure.
And so with these things, there was just been a line drawn, by our society at certain points in time saying, look, we can't handle this. And so we just had to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. So now we're in a situation where some of us are trying to basically throw the red flag and say, hey guys, let's wait a second. And let's try to decide, have we veered too far off of the path of freedom? And maybe should we revisit some of these things from our past that we just kind of decided were evil or too powerful or whatever. And I think that, that the concept of the war on drugs just in general is something that we need to revisit. And part of the reason for that is because that some of these compounds actually have a lot more benefits than what they do downside. And THC is one of those, marijuana. It's a gateway drug only because it's in the hands of drug dealers. Mm-hmm. It's not even the same type of like level of addiction or, the extreme highs and lows of being high, the chemical like addictiveness of the substance itself. There's just so many reasons why we didn't get it right. We're always having good intentions throughout time, but we never quite get it right. And so we always have to be open-minded to coming back and revisiting some of these concepts once we have a greater understanding of them. And so when it comes to psychedelics, we have a mental health crisis in America. We have a situation where we're being bombarded from every direction by different types of mental health crisis in America, actually. And in the case of PTSD, in the case of like, trauma-based anxiety and depression symptoms, we're finding that the current treatments are not healing people. They are at best just numbing them out.
Okay.
And it is unfortunate that our veterans and our service personnel, even if it's law enforcement, even if it's firefighters and stuff, they are our best of our best citizens. And they are the most competent of our citizens. They do the most dangerous things. The jobs that no one else wants to do, I'm not going in there. Okay, well, somebody has to do it. And that's us. That's combat veterans, it's firefighters, it's law enforcement. And not only is that traumatizing, but that type of life experience separates those people by perspective from those who we are protecting from those experiences by the nature of it. You know, we're keeping you from danger, but we're going in there. And so we have this experience and it's hard to process. And, there are words like PTSD and there are words like reassimilation. And it's an ongoing process of reassimilation, especially with police officers who are continuously kind of being re-traumatized because you're seeing the next messed up thing all the time.
Every day.
And so there are very strong compounds out there that when used correctly in a mindful therapeutic environment with the right intentions behind it, because intentionality, set and setting, is incredibly important with these things. Okay. But with the right set and setting, it can provide an experience that helps that person struggling to reassimilate, struggling to process these things, struggling to find a new relationship with God or keep their existing relationship with God whole, on a higher percentage basis, like with higher success rates than anything we've ever found.
So how does it do it exactly? Is it something that's
there's a sciencey way to
chemically change the brain, or is it?
So true psychedelics are serotonergic. They affect serotonin receptors. Like, I'll give you an example: mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
The active molecule there, psilocybin, which metabolizes to psilocin in the body, is an exact fit for the serotonin receptor. So what we know, and I'm not a scientist, I just talk to the scientists and try to repeat what they tell me. But psychedelics have qualities of inducing neurogenesis, has the ability to help your brain and nervous system grow new cells or repair damaged ones, and also neuroplasticity. So you think about things like depression or addiction, or PTSD is, your brain is in a rut, and suddenly you have a tool to get out of that rut, right? And maybe go a different direction. So the neuroplasticity that is induced by psychedelics is very helpful to that. And to kind of carry on with what Carl just said, like, the intentionality of these things is very important. So you have to, when your brain is in a plastic state, if you say I want to do this, if that's your intention, then your brain, you give yourself the ability to try something new, right? So you mentioned, is this just we're wanting to let people go to the club and party? Typically when you're talking about therapeutic psychedelic use, that's not the idea, right? I mean, if you want to have a good time, go have a good time. But like, if you want a modality that can heal, then these kind of intentionalities are very important. Psilocybin right now is in clinical trial for tobacco cessation, for alcohol cessation, for opiate and methamphetamine cessation, right? So you think about, some of these addictions, like, you're physiologically addicted to all of these drugs, or you have the capacity to be, right? So if you give your brain a tool to say, okay, I can walk away from this, I can get out of this rut, and I can choose to have a life without tobacco or alcohol or opiates, then you're on the step to achieving that goal.
Right. It's interesting. Is it more therapeutic, or is it a cure?
I always hesitate to use the words cure, but the clinical results in many cases are very, very strongly beneficial, supportive of these ideas. So,
and is it predominantly MDMA that's used, or are we talking about microdosing like mushrooms or all of it?
So
THC,
MDMA is
etc.
MDMA is actually not a true psychedelic, but it's close enough, right?
Mhm.
So, the Undersecretary for Health at the United States Department of Veteran Affairs last week did a podcast with John Lubecki, who's a federal lobbyist for MAPS, and they talked about the anticipated approval for MDMA. MDMA allows you to process your emotions. It creates, you think about things like PTSD. Your emotions are locked so tightly that you can't move past these traumatic experiences. You can't process them, right? So just being able to release your emotions and begin to talk through these things that are holding you back, being able to have the ability to be introspective is extraordinarily therapeutic. So, like I said, the last trial result I saw was 71% of test subjects 2 months after had completely gone into remission, right? That means 29% didn't. Right now, maybe we need more research to figure out, why that minority isn't responsive to this therapy. Maybe their physiology or their neurochemistry or something is such that they need a different tool. But the true psychedelics, like I mentioned, psilocybin mushrooms, that's probably going to be approved for prescription in 2 or 3 years. LSD is a very famous psychedelic, right? It was, actually the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous swore by it. It was, he felt it was hugely therapeutic for exiting alcohol dependency. You also have peyote, mescaline, ayahuasca, which is a decoction of depends 3 or 4 Amazonian plants, but at its base it's essentially DMT plus an MAOI inhibitor in a tea. So DMT is a very powerful psychedelic, and there's DMT and 5-MeO DMT, which are related molecules but have very different effects. And then what am I missing here? I'm very excited about the emergence of interest in a psychedelic drug called ibogaine. It's the alkaloid derivative of the root bark of a West African shrub. It's arguably the most powerful and maybe one of the most dangerous psychedelics.
Long lasting.
People in an ibogaine treatment, you might be riding the lightning for 12 hours to 2 days.
Right.
It's not a pleasant, and ibogaine is not as I've never had anyone tell me ibogaine's a pleasant experience, but it's very powerful. It has a unique capacity to completely bind the opiate receptor.
Mm-hmm.
So that so what it's famous for really is allowing people to exit opiate dependency without withdrawal. Which if you understand opiate addiction, the primary barrier seems to be the withdrawal just is so horrific that most people just can't get off, even if that's their intention to do so.
Sure. So when you're taking this, is this like a daily regimen that you're doing, or is this something you do one time and then
most psychedelic, most trial data is based around one or maybe a couple treatments.
Okay.
Now, in popular culture and in society, especially with things like psilocybin, people are looking at microdosing. So a microdose is a subperceptual dose. So if you feel it, you took more than a microdose.
Right.
Right. So there's not as much research about that.
So you're not walking around tripping here.
No.
You're just taking the edge off. You're kind of connecting things, or
It's
making
not even
things.
microdosing is not even taking the edge off because you don't feel it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's literally just the concept that if you're adding it into your body, you're opening up your brain's ability to get more neuroplastic.
Okay.
So there's a lot of questions about microdosing. Is it the cumulative? Do they build up time? But just maybe having that little bit of psilocybin in your system is therapeutic and helps you start the process of opening up to where you can take a larger dose or have a more extended treatment that has a higher potential for a healing modality.
Also, if let's say that you're a healthcare practitioner and you're bringing in people to this psychedelic treatment, another use for microdosing would literally or could literally just be testing people's gut reaction, because some people, it messes their gut up. They're pukey or it makes them uncomfortable. And so you need to know that going in, and that microdosing would be a way to figure that one out as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Psychedelics are not for everybody. And especially with some of the more powerful ones, it might be a good strategy to see, take a microdose and see how the subject reacts, and if there's, any negative effect, maybe there's more screening or better understanding of what we're trying to get here that needs to happen.
So I've heard a lot about was ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a whole experience, right? You're going down to Mexico, you're doing a thing, you're in a hut, something like that. I mean, I don't know what's going on. And then you come out and you're a new man.
They got drums.
Yeah. So is that a goal? Is that something you guys are working towards?
Absolutely.
Like here?
100%.
And how would that happen? Is part of it the hut and the drums, or are we talking about at the VA hospital?
I think some psychedelics can be used effectively in clinical settings. Ayahuasca is, very powerful psychedelic. The Amazonians tend to have a dietary regimen that you use before you have the treatment. You have a whole preparation process. So you know what you want, you know what your goal is going into this experience. Many of the folks that I talk to about ayahuasca are veteran groups. And it's one of the things I hear from them is that, we go down to this with the folks we served with, because, the bonding experience here is important. You're emotionally and mentally vulnerable during these treatments. So it's a good thing to have people that people that you've had similar experiences with to talk to and process during these treatments. The whole ritualistic aspects of this with drums and chanting and whatnot. It does seem to these are medicines that certain cultures have used for generations, if not hundreds or thousands of years. So they do seem to have a significant component of these experiences in terms of helping people focus or helping. I haven't used ayahuasca, so I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm not the best person to ask about this.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
But these the ritualistic, the ceremonial, the sacramental aspect of these practices does seem to be important, and recognizably, it's going to be hard to simulate all this in a clinical setting.
Sure,
right? But especially with just starting with the idea of standardizing a dose. When you have a medicine that can be brewed from 3, 5, maybe 6 different plants, there's got to be for clinical research, you'll have to kind of dial down to a specific recipe that's replicatable, just to have a proper investigation here.
I got to believe once the FDA gets involved with this or whatever, it's gonna, I don't know, maybe the drums will get thrown out the window.
Well, you can, once you have things like a standardized dose and a regimen, you can proceed to ask further questions like, certain parts of these rituals, is that beneficial part of this treatment? So you can investigate this.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
We need to reinvestigate exactly what types of settings and environments are healing. The quote unquote clinical setting of a hospital is not healing. And so I could see this movement hopefully over time maybe spawning some sort of new type of facility that's closer to something that could be called a wellness facility.
Is it true that Oregon's legalized all this?
So I'm glad you asked. So at our St. Louis conference on October 21, we were flying in Andreas Met. He's the founder and CEO of an Oregon company called Satya Therapeutics. He is Oregon's largest legal psilocybin producer, and they also have a service facility. They put out a press release last week where they have where they announced have actually served 64 individuals who've come to them for psilocybin assisted psychotherapy. So mushrooms are now legal through a regulated framework in Oregon. We also have Josh Capel. He's a partner at Vincente Cederberg, one of America's top marijuana and psychedelic law firms. He's actually a Missourian, graduate of Truman State University. But Josh is deeply involved in what Colorado is doing. So last year, the voters of Colorado approved decriminalization of and personal possession of limited amounts of certain psychedelics. So, where Oregon went with a regulated access framework, Colorado has a more modest decriminalization of personal possession framework that seems to be suited to certain ceremonial or ritualistic psychedelic practices. And then recently, I believe the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has signed off on some significant legislation that passed the California General Assembly. So
even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Well, I would point out, Gavin Newsom is routinely cited in the mainstream media as a potential presidential candidate, right? So, you better believe he talked to his pollsters before signing that bill.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, to go back to what you began this segment with, in the United States, we have multiple, often intersect health and addiction crises, right? I mean, just think about what COVID did to us. You had, half of our population basically sequestered at home, in fear, if not existential terror.
Yeah.
Right. And you think about
COVID, literally, you had a crisis already, and you just threw gasoline on it.
That's one way to put it.
Yes. Well, and it messed the adults up, but what's it doing to them kids?
Yep.
And so this next couple of cycles of adults are going to have some serious, struggles of their own. They're going to need some really advanced solutions. And I think that psychedelics is an experience, no matter if you're using LSD or MDMA or psilocybin, that what it does subjectively, like from my experience, is it shows you why it matters to be a good person. It shows you why we're all really connected and how we're all really connected. And it forces empathy, like true, honest empathy onto people, where they see everyone kind of as their self in a way for a moment there. It's like, I'm you and you're me. Like, it breaks down that line between like the world and my ego. And it kind of makes me care about everyone else's outcome, not just my own outcome. And that's really important, because we got to realize that the people that are in need, or people that are having these type of like issues, they're not balanced. They're not seeing the world from a balanced, healthy, positive perspective. And it's hard to break in on that. It's hard to give people a new way to think. And this is something that literally is like an all-control delete for like a Windows blue screen of death. Like, imagine an analogy where someone's mental illness could be described as a glitchy operating system that's got some malware on it, and now you're giving them the opportunity to intentionally decide what they need to restart their operating system with. And if it's all fun and games and you're just trying to have instant gratification and go party and have fun, and you're using psychedelics with that, it forces a high level of what they call trait openness, which is the ability to decide on doing something new. You're probably going to really want to keep going down that road, and that might be a really unhealthy thing, because that openness and that fun that you're having from that experience could really take you in a couple different directions. You could say, man, I really want to work hard in my life so I can make this happen for myself again and again. Or you could say, that's all I want to do, and I'm not going to do anything else but that. I would just argue that those people are going to have those battles in their own life, regardless of how it turns out. And I'm not going to demonize anything. I'm not going to demonize alcohol for it, or any kind of drug or anything. It's all our own personal journey. And those of us who are going to make it and strive and make this world better need all the tools that we can have. And we don't need to take these tools away from our thrivers just because there's a pool of other people out there that aren't going to be able to use it properly. I'm just going to argue that those people weren't really going to make it anyway. I don't know how else to say it, but we need to be doing the things we can do for the people that are trying. And when we've got people coming to us say, look, I want to be a good person. I want to work hard and help my family, but I can't break out of this depression or this feeling of worthlessness or whatever it is. That's when I start thinking to myself, psychedelics.
One thing I hear from a lot of veterans and also first responders, especially in law enforcement, is their service experiences have left them scarred with what we call like a moral compass injury, or they feel. I spoke to one of the guys who came to one of our committee hearings in Jefferson City. He talked about how he felt that he could never be forgiven for the things he had done in his service career, even though it was what he was ordered to do. He felt spiritually lost. He felt disconnected from God. He felt like he wasn't a human being who had the moral right to talk to or be with other human beings. And with psychedelics, being able to unlock those emotions, to process them, maybe even to feel joy, to accept yourself, whether or not you believe in God, but in a spiritual way, is a very powerful thing.
It really is.
To recognize that you are worthy of forgiveness and love. That's something that some people don't have right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's right there for us. And having gone through it, when I wake up the next day, number one, you don't want to do it again right away, because it's a lot of work. It's draining.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about psychedelic therapy, we're not just talking about you have this treatment, you have this experience, for days or weeks or even months afterwards. You have the opportunity to integrate those insights you've uncovered, those emotions, those feelings you've processed, and take those next steps. Mm-hmm. Right. So I kind of use the analogy of, you got psychedelics are tools. Like you got a shovel, right? You go outside, you dig up a hole in the ground or whatever. Right. Well, now you got a shovel, you got a hole in the ground, and you got a pile of dirt. Right. Now, to actually make something useful out of this, it takes some next steps. Maybe you clear out that hole, line it with clay or brick, and you have a well. Or maybe you do something useful with that hole in the ground that's just sitting there. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Maybe you take that pile of dirt and move it over to this area to cover up another hole in the ground that's dangerous.
So when they do these trials, typically is it paired with therapy?
Yep.
and things like that? I mean, that they
before
go hand
and
in
after.
hand.
Yep.
Okay. So do you have to qualify too by like a psychiatrist or something to say, yes, this person can handle this experience? Or
there's typically a screening process. So, cardiovascular issues is probably one of the big things that they screen for. Mm-hmm. There are individuals with psychosis or schizophrenia or bipolar depression who this may not be a good idea for. There's actually some clinical investigation underway into individuals with those issues. you want to, so like the clinical trial process itself is fairly complex, right? Typically it's done in 3 pre-approval stages. Phase 1 is like toxicity, right? Does it kill you? Right. Typically in that stage 1, it's healthy individuals. And then in phase 2, it's like, okay, does it have efficacy, right? Slightly larger pool of subjects with a specific indication. Psilocybin is in phase 3 is being examined for multiple issues, right? Phase 3 is kind of a population level trial, 50, 100 or more individuals. So this is where you can kind of dial in, how what percentage of the subjects with this indication is it does have efficacy for, are there adverse events, what are the adverse events, so that gives you a lot of data that you can really use to make decisions with. So FDA will take, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 data, say, okay, well, doesn't look like this is too dangerous. maybe has this is the level of efficacy. These are the known adverse events. These are the protocols that were followed and that we recommend for use by prescription. And then after approval, there may be further clinical investigations if necessary. Phase 4 trials. But the problem with this is that this takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So the FDA actually labeled psilocybin and MDMA, which are both illegal Schedule 1 drugs. In 2018, FDA said MDMA and psilocybin are breakthrough therapies. MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for major depression. Now it's 2023. In next year, with 2024, MDMA is expected to get final approval. We're told psilocybin is going to be 2026 or 27 for final approval for major depression. So you think about that: 6 years from breakthrough therapy designation for MDMA to approval, 9 years potentially for psilocybin from breakthrough therapy designation to approval. Right. To me, that's insane because we know these therapies save lives. So one of the things that we're working on politically is we would like to see federal law say, okay, if it's a Schedule 1 drug that is designated a breakthrough therapy, it's immediately rescheduled to a place where it can be investigated and even prescribed.
So what are you doing to work to make that happen?
So
besides a conference in St. Louis and Kansas City.
So did you see the Columbia Missourian article yesterday?
No.
So Columbia Missourian yesterday published a great article on.
Make sure we put a link on here.
Yeah.
We'll link it up.
Let me pull this up real quick. They interviewed Elaine Brewer with the Humble Warrior Wellness Center in St. Louis, and she is the spouse of a guy who was deployed in the Navy with SEAL Team 6. His specialty was explosive ordnance disposal, and they also interviewed William Wisner with Grunt Style Foundation. You might be familiar with Grunt Style. They're the foundation arm of the Grunt Style Company, which is a patriotic apparel company out of San Antonio. Now, the foundation side is out of St. Louis, but Grunt Style Foundation is part of a national coalition called the Veterans Mental Health Leadership Coalition. That's VMHLC.org. And that coalition is the umbrella for like 45 different veteran organizations that are working on psychedelic therapy access. A lot of the organizations in that coalition are special operations focused. A lot of them are focused on specific things like TBI, traumatic brain injury. Some of them have a little bit broader focus with things like depression or addiction.
How's the VA support for this? There's obviously
Open
lot
and
of-
ready.
Yeah, so the VA is jumping on board with this after years, right? This year, U.S. Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, and Senator Cory Booker, who's a Democrat from New Jersey, filed a bill called the Breakthrough Therapies Act, and that just says that if it's a breakthrough therapy, it should be legal by prescription and move to a schedule where clinical investigation is possible.
Mhm.
So that's a really good idea in my mind.
Mhm. Is this for all anything?
Yes.
Cancer, psychedelics, whatever you name it.
Well,
I mean,
sure.
I mean, all medicines.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
In the United States, under the Controlled Substances Act, which was enacted in 1970, we schedule drugs according to their medical
Right.
utility and their potential for abuse.
Mhm.
Schedule 1 designation is where either Congress or the DEA has determined a drug has no medical value
Mhm.
and a high potential for abuse. Right. So, 1970, Congress made those decisions. Those were political decisions. President Nixon wanted to suppress black people, Jews, and hippies.
Mhm.
His political opponents, and he saw drug prohibition as a way to do it. So let's just ban all the things that hippies love to use, right? And then we can crack down on them that way. So the original, drug regulatory framework in this country since 1970 has had dozens of drugs that are Schedule 1, like marijuana is a good example.
Right.
Which is the number one medicinal substance on the planet.
Right. So in the last 20 odd years, you have states saying, okay, the federal government's, full of crap. We're gonna go our own way with this. States are co-equal sovereigns with the federal government. So, individual states have been saying, okay, we're gonna make this available by physician's recommendation or for, adult use or recreational use, whatever you want to call it. And eventually, it took 53 years, but now the President Biden's administration is finally moving forward with moving marijuana out of Schedule 1, and they're going to move it probably to Schedule 3, which is where we have ketamine and codeine,
Mhm.
and other prescription drugs, but which is not, again, ideal, but it's way better than the federal government
Off
saying
limits.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me of is Amendment 3 here in Missouri.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I know you're not a big fan.
not a big fan because the
Can you
thing
tell me
is,
why?
well, so here's why. Because marijuana should not be on a schedule, period. Marijuana is a less complicated molecule than caffeine. Okay. And it's less dangerous than caffeine.
So,
Marijuana.
so the Amendment
Teach
3
them,
that
teach.
created this recreational marijuana framework in Missouri was entirely written and campaigned for by industry operators who wanted to control the market. That's 100% what it was about, right? What Amendment 3 did not do was remove criminal penalties for possession, right? You still have all the statutory possession felonies and misdemeanors that exist. They just said, it's legal to possess up to 3 ounces. More than 3 ounces is a misdemeanor. More than 6 ounces is a felony, right? I have a problem with that,
Mhm.
right? I think it should be 100% legal. I mean, there's not a possession limit on alcohol,
Right.
right? I mean, there's not a possession limit on guns. There's not a possession limit on sugar, which is probably the worst drug in society right now.
You can go get 129 grams of sugar from a gas station and they'll think you're on your way out. But I can't go get however many ounces of weed I want. I mean, I can see why somebody that doesn't understand anything about it would be like, oh yeah, because it's weed or whatever. And they just think it's bad. But that is one of these just dogmas of the past that's not a real thing.
Which is unfortunate because that's exactly what it is. But I think that tide's changing.
Yeah.
And in time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in the meantime, we've got 22 a day casualties.
Well, more than that.
More than that.
It's probably, the military veteran fatality or suicide rate is probably closer to 40 a day. We just have the data to substantiate, 22. But, think about all those alcohol overdoses or opiate overdoses.
Oh yeah.
You know,
If I would have died in my car accident back in 2010, they wouldn't have called that a suicide.
Yeah.
But you could. I mean, I was so reckless. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these veteran deaths, it's kind of on the line there. You know, I could see how that number would actually be a little higher.
Actually, I think the number is like closer to 150 Americans who commit suicide every day.
Yeah, total Americans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so nice.
Does the IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters, support this at all? I'm a
So
fireman.
we're talking. I've been talking to Matt Dowd at the Kansas City firefighters.
I don't know.
Their chapter seems to be real interested.
Okay.
There's a firefighter here in Boone County. You might know her, Alina.
I know the face.
She's
Boone
young,
Counties.
but she's super smart and super motivated.
I'm with the city, Boone County, and the city. It's like the Crips and Bloods.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Carl, you got to introduce him to Alina.
I sure will.
Yeah.
Yep. So Alina's here in Columbia. She's one of our best advocates. She has been studying another psychedelic, 5-MeO-DMT, for a long time. It's very powerful and very valuable psychedelic treatment. And she has a passion for bringing this message to the first responder community.
So I know, like, we've been told at the city that we're not allowed, now that marijuana is legal, we're not allowed to partake. Police department or the fire department. And the rumor is, nobody really knows for sure. City manager apparently rumor has it, city manager's like, I don't care. We're going to figure this out, whatever. I don't care. But everybody else, no problem. Fire department, police, not. And
well, that's probably because you guys take a lot of federal grant money.
That's exactly what it comes down to.
Yeah.
We take, and in order to qualify for the federal grant money, we have to meet the DOT, even though we don't follow any other Department of Transportation regulation rules for anything, but we have to qualify to their standard we have to meet their standard to qualify for the grant money. And part of that is to not use marijuana.
Right.
And
so fortunately that's going to be changing soon.
But nobody knows. I was going to say, nobody knows if that's actually true. That's kind of just been the scuttlebutt, if you will.
Yeah,
But yet they let you drink alcohol.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So fortunately, with marijuana,
I mean, nobody's smoking at work, you know, and I don't think anybody would. I mean, that's not.
Well, you guys are really competent human beings, and let's say somebody got really drunk the night before and came in there a little hungover or whatever once in a while. You'll razz them up, but there's nobody drinking on the job over there, right? And all that stuff. So
right. And if they do, there is a responsible way that we deal with that.
And so then marijuana is the same thing. But it's less calories, less hangover, less actual intoxication. If you drink like a fifth of whiskey, you are done. Right? You can't go to a fire or whatever. You know what I mean?
I know, because I've drank a fifth of whiskey.
Realistically speaking, you're going to have to smoke a whole lot before you're actually incapacitated. And then you still didn't take in any calories, and you're still going to be fine the next day.
Depending on your tolerance.
Well, depending on tolerance, and also there are certain people that can just take one puff and they're asleep. Yeah. So you got to know that about yourself. I wouldn't try it for the first time on the job as a law enforcement officer.
I am sorry, folks, with whatever's going on with my dog. There's a squirrel or a leaf that fell in the front yard. Something happens. My dog needs some psychedelics, I think.
You got a little ambient.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know about that, but as a cool dog.
Yeah. She's all right, but she's on edge right now, so
it's okay.
Something's out there.
Yeah. But it is it's exciting to hear all these.
I know a lot of people are very interested in it, and I think a lot of people probably, it's just the other, you don't want to jeopardize your career. You don't want to give any problems to somebody. It's silly. So it is what it is, but it is ridiculous.
Well, I mean, we're saying a lot of things that are very positive about psychedelic therapy, but I do want to highlight again, I don't think this is a cure-all or a panacea.
Well, that was one thing I wanted to ask.
These are tools.
Yeah.
Effectively used, they have great potential, but by themselves, again, it's all about your intention setting. It's all about your follow through. If you put in the work, they could have, almost miraculous results. But
with the good, there's always a bad. And I assume this is the bad, is that some people, maybe the intent, you said right from the beginning that intent was important. So if your intention isn't good,
Yes.
is that the main negative here? Do you think?
It's one of the negatives.
Right.
It's one of the negatives. Absolutely.
What else is there?
So like, I would like, look at how some cultures have used psychedelics throughout history. Like the Vikings would brew a psychedelic tea, probably with mushrooms that they would drink before they went into battle. The berserkers, right? There are aspects of psychedelic use that seem to be aligned with a warrior or a martial modality, right? It does seem to help sharpen your vision and give you a feel for, these kinds of situations, right? The Mayans would consume psychedelics and sacrifice, live humans, right? So
sounds a little extreme.
It is, yeah. But just to give you an example of cultural historical uses where that doesn't seem quite like a healing practice to me, right? So yes, the intention and the directed usage of this is we're talking about the therapeutic potential, not about Now, I will say I've heard of trials being done in the special operations community where, if you can use psilocybin to give you one more day in the field, that kind of thing, that's always something that those guys seem to be interested in,
So that comes back to, we talked about with like microdosing, maybe that's more of a daily regimen or something you do more often. But with some of these more experienced things like the ayahuasca or whatever, is that usually a one and done, or is it once a year, or is it once a...
The only things I've ever heard about a microdose would be psilocybin and LSD. I've never really even heard about somebody microdosing MDMA or ketamine. Or you definitely don't microdose ayahuasca or DMT. I can't imagine, because
so my question is that like a one-time event and you walk out of there and you're
correct,
or is that something you need?
No, it's a one-time.
So is it a routine maintenance, whereas maybe once a year?
So let's say that you had one incident. Let's say that you lived a totally Beaver Cleaverville life, but you're a cop, and all of a sudden you had to shoot somebody one time. That's one thing. Now let's say that you're what's a crazy example? Let's say that you're like a human trafficking victim for a year and a half. You've got 100 traumas. These two situations are on the polar opposite ends of a spectrum of trauma.
Sure.
And so with your extreme cases, you're going to need to unravel that bad boy using every tool in the tool bag and your psychotherapy over the course of time. But let's say, for example, in that worst case scenario, if I was just ballparking what a clinician is probably going to recommend, there will be no more than 6 major macro doses a year, probably not more than 4. Would you agree with that? I mean, I could see 2 major macro doses a year being.
Yeah, with the more powerful psychedelics.
I have to go find out what's going on with my dog.
Go check
carry on. Okay.
I don't mind.
You guys, we got an intruder, and the dog's trying to help us out, and we're over here just podcasting away.
There's a dangerous squirrel.
There's a fire or something. Yeah.
Maybe there's a black bear.
That's fine. It's probably just the neighbor's dog. It does actually look like a squirrel. He's down there Anyway, to get back on track, it's very, very exciting. And we've been doing this now for 2 years. We've been having these events. More and more people are getting interested, and we're spreading the good word, trying to educate people on why it's important. And we're trying to educate people on how exactly we're going to thread the needle, because we don't want to increase access for the population. We don't want to increase access to people that are going to use it for recreational purposes. But our people out there that just don't know anything about this issue have to realize that those people are already taken care of. You don't even have to find access to these drugs. If you just go to literally any of the hundreds of different festivals that there are going around right now in this country, you're going to find artisanal manufacturers of these substances that are just out there in the population from every single different walk of life possible, that have totally normal tax-paying careers and stuff, that go to these festivals and partake in these things and just give it away to other people for free
Yeah,
or
I
a
mean,
small amount
like,
of money.
there's a lot of questions here, right? Do I believe that an individual has the um, inherent, the natural right to put something into their own body, if as long as you're not hurting anyone else? Yes. Do I have the belief? Do I believe that a human being has the natural right to choose how to manipulate their consciousness? Absolutely. Kind of on the flip side, psychedelic medicines are powerful, powerful things. They should not be treated lightly. They should be not be. They should be treated with a lot of respect and maybe a little fear.
You don't allow your 16-year-old to purchase a 600 horsepower Mustang as their first vehicle.
Right.
For the same reason, you do not want to get people like low experience, low level human beings in contact with these extremely high powered psychedelics.
Yeah. Another way to look at it is like, mushroom culture seems to come from, southern Mexico, from a town called San Jose del Pacifico in Oaxaca. Ayahuasca's phenomenon, from the Amazon. Now mushrooms also been used in many other cultures around the world for, millennia. So people have been using these modalities for a long time. In the United States, we're a very diverse society, geographically and otherwise, right? I don't think that our society in this country is entirely prepared for this, right? Because we've lost a lot of knowledge from earlier generations, from other cultures, right? If you grow up as a Shipopo Indian in Peru, right? You grow up in a culture where this knowledge is very deep. It's disseminated. It's shared with the children. The Shipopo, those who choose to become shamans and serve these medicines, they train for sometimes decades before they actually serve these medicines, right? In the United States, our culture, our society does not have this inherent base of knowledge, right? It's beginning to kind of filter through because, this knowledge is being culturally transmitted back to us at several different places, right? But we're not at a place in American society where, you can grow up and, we can expect you to know that, this is what psilocybin is, this is what it's used for, this is what it's valuable for, this is what the risks are. Like, people don't know the risks. They might hear something on a podcast or hear Joe Rogan talk about it, and you really need to do a little bit more investigation and have a little bit more education before you really attempt or seek these out.
And it's true. The whole point of kind of my podcast journey, in itself, is identifying the lost elements of our culture and trying to reorient towards kind of an objective true north, like an objective reality that we can all share and appreciate and kind of manage together. And those older cultures that are still connected to some of those traditions, it's how they even decide their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month life. Like, everything is revolving around these old traditions, and we kind of were separated from that. And now our tradition is clock in, clock out, chase money, so on and so forth. And I really feel like that if we can open up a pathway to bring tens of thousands of people eventually through these kinds of treatments, that it will cause a cultural change, because some of these experiences that we have on psychedelics, even though they are our own kind of subjective experience, they ring true. Like, they all kind of go together. They all kind of sound similar. And I feel like that there are like hints of an objective reality that we're all shown and we can all kind of agree upon. Because, like, you were saying earlier, like, in America right now, we can't even decide what is a man or a woman. we can't decide if there is an objective reality or if there are just a bunch of subjective
Well, I
realities.
mean, our society's kind of been flattened in some ways, right? I mean, like we've lost, whether you're German or Norwegian or Anglo or African or South Asian, or wherever in the world that your ancestors emigrated from, right? They brought with them certain cultural traditions and knowledge, and our society is kind of flattened. The younger generations, don't seem to have not been transmitted, those practices of their, ancestors, right? And so, and a lot of this stuff is, a lot of this, the cultural viruses, if you will, or the cultural movements seem to be kind of
trying to
emerging.
replace that.
Yeah, new ideas from new disciplines and maybe crazy scientific theories that are being disseminated by our educational institutions and and I'm being charitable here, right?
Jordan Peterson calls it the God-shaped hole.
Yeah,
we try to fill it with things like climate change and gender ideology and victim mentality,
right? And you see that pervasively in our societies, this loss of spirituality, loss of connectedness.
Good luck waking up an atheist
isolation.
after doing 5-MeO DMT.
Yeah. The capacities the psychedelics have to have for creating introspection is extraordinary, right? Just to be able to see yourself in a new light.
Our biggest defender is our own ego.
Yep.
And a lot of these psychedelic compounds give you a perspective of what the world looks like just from outside that ego.
So, all right, let me ask you this. Do you think this is a good thing also for people that aren't suffering from depression, PTSD, just the average Joe? Does this help you maybe see a new perspective or a better thing?
There are, we're mostly talking about psychedelics as healing modalities, but there are other uses, so in a qualified sense, I would say yes. Steve Jobs, for instance, is kind of a classic example, right? He's a famous user of LSD. He credits it for helping him achieve his visionary work, right? In tech circles, you see this a lot. A lot of tech founders and CEOs use psychedelics to achieve these kind of visionary capacities, right? But even beyond that, I think it's generally speaking a good thing when a human being can take a second, have the capacity to do, truly be introspective, right? Truly consider, their place in the world, their relationship to other human beings, the moral and ethical implications and consequences of their own actions and their intentions, right? And that's something that psychedelic treatments can do.
So, yeah, I agree with everything he said. To try to further answer that question, because it's really important. Let's say you're trying to decide how to have fun this coming year, and you're like, okay, should I go on a vacation? Maybe I should do a hardcore psychedelic trip. Like, this is not the type of entry point. But let's say, or at least not that I recommend. Let's say that someone, though, for example, is like doing good in life, but they're starting to get this feeling like they're in a rut, or they need to pivot, or they're just not, maybe a little bit of depression sneaking in. Maybe they feel like that they're starting to go through maybe a midlife crisis, and they need to imagine having the option to have like a check-in with Mother Nature, like am I on the right path? What's my next mission kind of thing? And you go into it with this mindset of like personal growth. I think that you're going to, even if you're not traumatized or having PTSD or any of these things, I still feel like that with that intentionality, you could get your answer.
I went to college with your wife.
Correct. Yes.
Right. And I kind of, at some point, I just looked at myself, and this wasn't a psychedelic introspection. This is just me kind of, shooting from the hip, but at some point I kind of looked at myself and my career ideas or plans, and I said, all of this sounds terrible. Do I want to go to grad school for economics and spend 4 years writing a dissertation with incredibly esoteric, mathematical theorems? Or do I want to go to law school and then spend for 3 years in a classroom and then spend 4 years as an associate in some law firm, billing 2,000 hours a year? And I was like, this all sounds terrible. I might make some money, but so I just kind of like go off in my own direction. I got into I was always been in the restaurant and hospitality industry, got into the wine business. Then, someone, educated me in cannabis. That was a direction I thought had a lot of potential, right? That led me to politics, creating and in some areas leading some of these movements that are emerging in society where people were saying there's something wrong with what we're allowed to do or not allowed to do, and how do we lead to that political change, right? And so that was like 15, 16 years ago, maybe,
Wow.
in that time frame, right? And so, I paid off my student debts which were maybe, 5, 10,000, I paid my student debts off by 2010, right? And I don't have a credit card. I've never really had, significant debt. Kind of just went on my own path, for better or worse. There've been consequences, both positive and negative, of my decisions. But the thing that's interesting to me now is that a lot of my peers who I knew from high school or college in that time frame, they're coming to me and they're telling me how lucky I am to not be trapped in in the career pathway they chose, or being tied to student loan debt, or being tied to some industry that they realize now is just a soul sucking, spiritually void thing. And there's just like I said, in the United States, a lot of our society is in this state of spiritual and social isolation, right? We've forgotten how to look inward to ourselves and really truly examine what's best for us. We've failed to a lot of our economy is built around professions or ideas that disconnect us from anything but chasing those paychecks, or that larger house, or that greater commercial success. I'm not saying those things are wrong, but a lot of people feel now that there's something wrong with their pursuit of these things, and maybe not with this pursuit, but the pathway that they've taken in those pursuits, right? And so people are really looking for these ideas. How can we reconnect with each other? How can I in some cases, how can I reconnect with my family, with my community, with my country? How can I reconnect with God?
Imagine somebody that lived their entire life in a concrete jungle trying to tell us about climate and about having a connection to nature and all this stuff. It bothers me, because I see a lot of people that are screaming the loudest and pushing the hardest who are upside down, and that don't really have the perspective they think they have. And I honestly believe that if some of them people took psychedelics, they would realize how far off base that they are, because when your ego's not there to protect you, you have to see reality for what it is.
That brings me back to the question about maybe somebody that's not clinically depressed or PTSD or et cetera, but maybe somebody that just doesn't have a good perspective on life. And
the problem with that is that I feel like a certain type of person like that, if showed the truth, is so far off course, it will actually cause them to commit suicide.
Well, okay. Well, then don't do it.
That's why I can't. I could never be like, oh, this person is like, say like someone is just so like off track with their ideology that they're just like in dogma land and not connecting to reality. That person is like off on an island, right? And if you tell them, hey, if you just give them that crash course where it's like you really show them the full picture, I don't think that might not be a healthy thing. You need to walk them back in.
I kind of disagree with you.
I would love to be wrong. I would love
I get by what you're saying by kind of shocking people into an awareness.
I could be wrong.
Let me ask you.
I could be wrong here. I'd love to be wrong here.
What is the difference between I'm just a kid in Mizzou and I pop some microdots and I'm on my way, versus somebody that's doing this to overcome whatever and become better. How come those people aren't improving their lives
Some
or
of
whatever?
them-
How
some
come,
of them
is
do.
it again the intent,
Some of
or
them-
is it what makes the experience different?
So there's a lot of people out
What
there.
makes the experience
look at-
difference between just I'm partying my
Right.
ass off and I'm improving?
So there's a lot of things. There are a lot of stories out there of people that walked backwards into a transformative life experience. Sam Harris will talk a little bit about that in his own life. There's probably some other ones I'm not thinking of right now off the top of my head, but there are people out there that start off with a recreational mindset, and then they're looking up at the stars all of a sudden, having this giant realization that, like, oh my gosh, this is a lot bigger ocean than what I imagined I was swimming around in. And you can have one of those moments. I don't like to romanticize or commercialize those things because it's not as clinically viable. And it's also like, it's kind of one of those like best case scenario kind of things, and we're trying to convince people based on, just a tighter framework than that. But realistically speaking, out of 100 just random college kids, another thing that I should really say here that I think of is life experience. When you're a kid, when you're an 18-year-old kid, what is the most responsibility you've ever had in your life? You maybe are paying your own cell phone payment right now.
Brushing your teeth every morning.
You just signed some contract to go into debt for your student loans and stuff. So you have almost no responsibility. And you also don't really have any life experience, right? So without some deep life experience, like some trauma, like being really hit in the face by actual reality stuff, those people just don't have enough context to really get out of it that full thing. It's like, they say sometimes like, oh, well, why would aliens ever visit human beings? Because we're like ants to them or something. Like, we're just so low level.
I kind of disagree with you here, Carl. Like, I think you're, I mean, I get what you're saying.
I love it.
Some people, it is not appropriate for them to be shocked into a new perspective or new reality. I get that. I can see in some
could be dangerous
in some places where that could be dangerous. But the other hand, human beings have incredible capacity.
Mm-hmm.
We have an incredible capacity to receive those things, right? There was a member in this individual in this community who I knew many years ago. He described his first experience with psychedelics. He wasn't someone who was like had a necessarily a quantifiable mental illness, but certainly felt spiritually and socially isolated, and told me about the first time that he went down. He was actually a physician. Went down to was invited down to an ayahuasca circle in Peru. Went out. His buddy actually decided, who had brought him there, actually decided.
Oh, this is episode 14 of the Missouri Line.
Yeah. And so he has this ayahuasca experience, and feels this tremendous joy. Right. This. There are things that his ego was keeping from him that he didn't even recognize or know about. Right. And he was relatively sane, healthy individual, but, he did feel a need for maybe subconsciously that he didn't recognize for, that introspective